Welcome and good evening. So good to see you all at WHYY. We're excited to have you here and to begin this wonderful evening as an opportunity to celebrate Michael I. Days. It is both an honor and a profound responsibility to join you in remembering and celebrating the life of Michael I. Days, a towering figure in Philadelphia journalism, a mentor to so many, and a steadfast believer in the power of truth told well. At WHYY, we often speak about public media's essential role in nurturing an informed and engaged citizenry. Michael embodied that mission long before many of us put it into words. He was public media in spirit, even when his platform was print, because his journalism served the public first, always. Michael's life was a masterclass in what happens when integrity meets purpose, from his early days growing up in North Philadelphia to leading the Philadelphia Daily News through its Pulitzer Prize-winning reporting. Michael never lost sight of journalism's higher calling, not simply to chronicle the world, but to improve it. He trusted his reporters, he believed in his community, and he had the courage to publish the truth, even when it carried risk. That trust, that faith in the work and in the people doing it is the heartbeat of every newsroom, and that matters. It's what keeps independent journalism alive. But Michael's legacy extends far beyond the stories he edited. His impact lives in the generations of journalists he mentored, young, often Black reporters who saw in him a vision of what was possible. Through his leadership with NABJ-Philadelphia and the National Association of Black Journalists, he opened doors that had too long been closed and made sure that the rooms of power reflected the communities they serve. For those of us in public media, Michael's example is a reminder that diversity is not a box to check. It is the foundation of truth itself. Because when we bring more voices to the table, we bring our reporting closer to reality. In a time when our media landscape is too often fragmented, trust is under siege. Michael's steady belief in the craft, principled, local, community-rooted journalism feels more urgent than ever. He understood that journalism, at its best, is not just about information. It's about connection. Michael listened, he mentored, he made people feel seen. Small gestures like his micrograms, little Post-it notes praising good work. But as we all know, it is often the simplest and smallest gestures that have the greatest impact. That was Michael, big heart, big integrity, big impact, delivered with grace. I am grateful to be one of Michael's mentees and students of the game. He inspired me to become a news leader. Michael's legacy surely lives on in all of us. Thank you, Michael, for nurturing young journalists and for all the seeds that you've planted in so many of us. As we honor his memory tonight, may we also renew our commitment to the ideals he championed, to tell stories that matter, to amplify voices that have too often gone unheard, and to ensure that through our work, whether in print, on air, or online, the people of this great city and this region are better informed, better understood, and better connected. Michael believed that journalism could be a force for good. Across the community, it's up to us to keep that faith alive. May God's peace and love surround the Days and Dodson family. And once again, thank you and welcome to WHYY. I'm Sarah Glover, Vice President of News and Civic Dialogue, and I will help journey us through this service this evening. Next, we are going to join together in song, and our musician and singer for this evening is none other than Mark Early Jr. Please join us in singing Lift Every Voice.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let a rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith but the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. O God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far the way, thou who hast brought thy might, let us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Oh, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our native land.
Thank you. I'm Reverend Mark Tyler, and looks like I'm the only non-journalist on the program, but I'm married to Leslie Patterson Tyler, and so she's my credential. She's a part of this organization, and really I think is the person that connected me to Michael so many years ago. I was also asked to give a couple of remarks before the invocation, so don't think I'm just doing the preacher thing when they get up and supposed to do one thing and just take advantage. So I know my time constraints, Angela. I won't be long, but I want to say this about Michael. I remember he asked me once during the height of 2020, I think it was, during the big rebellion that was happening all around the country, if I would come on Zoom and speak to the persons at the Inquirer. And I thought it was just going to be, you know, the writers. But it was everybody. I mean, like everybody. Like if you worked at the Inquirer, you were on that Zoom. I mean, if you drove a van, a truck, delivered anything, everybody was on. And what it said to me is it was about his commitment to truth-telling everywhere, that he saw everyone in that building as a part of news and production of news. And so this is what came to me when I was walking in tonight thinking about Michael. It's a passage of scripture that we often use in weddings from 1 Corinthians 13. You've heard it before, but I think it speaks to him as a journalist. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. And here's the point. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. What made Michael a great journalist is he rejoiced in telling the truth. Let us pray. God, we thank you for this wonderful truth teller, this person who, as we've heard earlier, amplified stories that others would not lift up, a person who was not content with simply getting his seat at the table, but opening the door for others to be there as well, and a person who did not believe that truth was situational, but that in good times and bad times, when it was easy to tell it and when it was difficult and challenging, he told the truth, not to enrage, but he told it because love said so. And now, as we celebrate his life tonight, may we truly celebrate it by leaving this place and emulating the best things of his life that he left behind for us to pick up. Let us too go into a world that is content to hear lies, but instead let us tell the truth, because that's what love does. Bless his soul, grant him rest, touch his wife, his sons, his family, and all of those who considered ourselves to be a part of his extended family. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Michael helped instigate many journalists across the city in establishing an affiliate chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists a few years ago. And we all stood in awe of him as someone who was retired, and it was his time to rest. But he saw a void and a need to further establish the impact that Black journalists have in the city of Philadelphia and the greater Philadelphia region. So it was a mentor of us, a stalwart who we thought was past his time, who was one of the most ferocious, and I like to call him a quiet lion, persons to kind of galvanize Black journalists in the city to reestablish themselves. And Michael was heading on the sunsetting of his 2 years of service of NABJ-Philadelphia. And so with his passing, his sudden passing, we celebrate him, we miss him, the hole is there, but we now have a president in Melanie L. Burney, who is an education reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And she will next give remarks, as she has had to step in the biggest of shoes to finish his term.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Mark Twain once said, "We should all endeavor to live so that when we come to die, even the undertaker is sad." We lost a good man, not just a giant in journalism, but a giant in life. Friend, mentor, colleague, editor, husband, father, son. Mike touched our lives in so many special ways. Only Mike could have me here in blue instead of my trademark pink and green. For those of you who know, you know, right? It is truly heartwarming to see the outpouring of love and respect for him tonight. And I thank you for being here to celebrate his life. And a big thanks to my dear friend Sarah and WHYY for hosting us tonight. And even though our hearts are heavy, very heavy, tonight is about celebration. We'll have some laughs, tell some stories, and maybe just a tear or two. And it's only right that we gather here in the city that Mike loved so deeply, and a city that shaped him and that he helped shape through his words, his leadership, and his example of a life well lived. I had the pleasure of knowing Mike for more than 30 years, almost my entire journalism career. And don't try to figure out how old I am. But just know that Mike was my big brother. And Sarah mentioned earlier how in 2023, Mike came roaring out of retirement to lead an effort to start our chapter. And of course, he recruited me to help. Who says no to Michael Days? I really had no choice. And many of you know that side eye that he would give that meant you need to get on board. And of course I did. And Mike worked tirelessly, determined to make it happen. And because of his leadership, we were all very proud when NABJ-Philadelphia became a chapter. We celebrated our second anniversary just last month as the only NABJ-affiliated chapter in Philadelphia. For us, Mike will always be our forever president, the one who got it started and showed us what was possible. I'll be finishing out the last 2 months of his term before the passing the torch on in January. But we'll keep moving forward with the blueprint, the legacy that Mike left for us, fighting for the values that he believed in: diversity, fairness, accuracy, and truth-telling. Our NABJ Philly Media Monitoring Committee will continue the work that Mike cared so much about, making sure our stories, the stories of the African American community, are fairly told with the dignity that our communities deserve. And because Mike was passionate about lifting up the next generation, we were very proud to establish the Michael I. Days Journalism Scholarship Fund just days after he passed. We have an ambitious goal, but with your help, we can get there. We want to raise at least $50,000 to help aspiring young journalists follow their dreams. That is a legacy worthy of the man we're celebrating tonight, Michael I. Days. Mike, did you ever know that you're my hero? You're everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wing. Thank you and good night.
Next, we'll hear from Catherine Hicks, Philadelphia NAACP President and publisher of the Sunday Sun newspaper.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Sarah, and the family and everyone for allowing me to be here this evening. To Michael's wife, Angela, and his children, I send my sincere condolences. To the family, friends, colleagues, and all of those who have gathered here today, we come to honor the extraordinary life and legacy of Michael I. Days. I met Michael when I was a part of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists through a dear friend, Linda Wallace, and my then fiance, Jerry Mondesire, who I have since taken over publishing the Philadelphia Sun from him. And when Jerry passed, Michael reached out to me and offered any assistance that he could with me taking over the paper, because that's the kind of person that he was. Where he could help, he did. A man whose contributions to journalism, to his community, and to the world at large were as profound as they were transformative. Michael was not just a journalist, he was a trailblazer and a mentor, a friend and a beacon of integrity and excellence in an industry that has power to shape our understanding of the world. Born with an unwavering commitment to truth and deep sense of responsibility to the public, Michael's career was one marked by courage, conviction, and insatiable curiosity about the world around him. He began his journey in journalism at a time when the industry, much like society itself, was grappling with the question of fairness, equity, and representation. Yet despite the challenges that lay before him, Michael carved out a path that was uniquely his own. And in doing so, he paved the way for others who would follow as a reporter, editor, and ultimately the first Black vice president of the Philadelphia Inquirer. I remember when Jerry Mondesire used to talk about stories of them working together at the Inquirer. And I remember those, and it just brings back, when I'm reading this, some of what was said. So, and in doing so, he paved the way for others who would follow as, again, a reporter, editor, ultimately the first Black vice president of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Michael embodied the very ideals that journalism stands for: a relentless pursuit of the truth, a passion for storytelling, a deep commitment to serving the public. His work was not just about covering the news, it was about making a difference, elevating voices that had too long been silenced, and challenging the status quo to ensure that all communities, especially those most marginalized, had a seat at the table. Michael's remarkable journey to becoming a Pulitzer Prize winner speaks to his unparalleled skill, dedication, and perseverance. But it was not just his accolades that set him apart. Michael's true grit was his ability to see the world through a lens of empathy and understanding, to connect with people from all walks of life and tell their stories in a way that honored their humanity. He was a pioneer not only for breaking barriers within the walls of the Philadelphia Inquirer, but for his larger role in reshaping the landscape of American journalism. As the first Black vice president of a major newspaper, Michael demonstrated that excellence is not bound by race or background, but by the strength of one's character, intellect, and passion for the work. He knew that every story told could spark change, and he dedicated his life to ensuring that those stories that mattered most were told with integrity and purpose. Michael was a mentor to many. He understood that journalism is not just about the stories you write, but about the impact you have on people around you. To those of us fortunate enough to have worked alongside him, Michael was a source of wisdom, guidance, and inspiration. He had a rare ability to challenge and uplift those he mentored, encouraging them to think critically, act courageously, and always strive for excellence. Today, as we reflect on Michael's remarkable life, we are reminded of the power of journalism to bring about change, to amplify voices that often go unheard. Michael's legacy through his books and writings will continue to inspire not just the next generation of journalists, but anyone who believes in the power of truth and the importance of storytelling. This matters. He leaves behind a world that is a little bit fairer, a little bit more inclusive, and much richer for having had him in it. As we say goodbye to our dear friend, colleague, and mentor, let us also celebrate his life, a life that showed us all the incredible impact that the individual can have. Michael Days was a pioneer, a journalist, and an author, a husband, a father, and above all, a champion of truth, justice. His legacy will endure in the work we do, the stories we tell, and in the lives he touched. Rest in peace, Michael I. Days. Your work is done, but your influence will live on forever. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Brian Tierney, former publisher of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hello, everyone. I knew Michael a little bit back in the 90s, but I really got to know him when I put together the group of people and we bought the Philadelphia Inquirer and Daily News, and I was in there every day. And you soon got to see how he was a journalist. That was important, but the key thing for Michael and he was an amazing leader, was that he was a loving family man. His family came first, Angela and their 4 sons. He was strong, tough, kind, a man of deep faith that he lived it every day. And I got to tell you, and I heard when I got there that most publishers didn't walk in through the, I love walking in through the Daily News newsroom. It just pumped me up, even in the most challenging days, to feel the energy and to see Michael and say hi and talk, and him giving me a little bit of what they were working on. And I just felt excited when I got to the elevator to go back up. And I remember thinking lots of times, too, that he went to Roman Catholic High School, so where he was, he could look across the street from where he worked to where he went to school, where my father also went to school, too, as well. So that kind of loved that connection. I knew Michael and Angela had 4 boys, but I never knew the backstory. And I got to tell you, Edward, you blew us away, man. And Paul Davies wrote about it yesterday in the Inquirer. It was just so powerful to hear it. And the way you presented it. And in the one hand, it just blew me away. On the other hand, it was like, that is so much like Mike and Angela. I can just totally see it, you know? So he lived his faith every day, strong, kind. When I think about Michael's passing, and I think about Mark Frisbee, another great colleague of ours, who I was able to recruit from the Courier Post to come over and lead the Daily News and basically be our chief operating officer. And that was just a couple of weeks ago. You know, it reminds us to be here every day, to work hard, to be kind, to think about others, to lead. And so when I leave here today, I want you all to think like I'm going to be thinking. Let's be like Mike. Let's be like Mike. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Elmer Smith, a retired Daily News columnist.
Well, first giving honor to God because God is due all honor, and also because Michael would have been fine with it. I want to start off by thanking all of you. I was away and not able to be with you during the period of early morning and also the burial. But I have been kept apprised by the things that you have written, the things that you have said. They have been so moving and so touching to me. I'm sort of social media challenged, not able to post very much, rarely even comment. But the things that you've said about this man that we love has put the social back in social media. I need to start by saying that thank you, first of all, Angela, for allowing me this time, and I'm going to use only 3 minutes. But also that I met Michael and Angela 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, frankly, in Louisville. And they were a group of distinguished journalists who would become distinguished journalists. These are people in the early stages of their career. Michelle Marriott and Merv Aubespon, who was more of a veteran, the sassy Betty Baye. But I also met Mike and Angela. And when I met them, Mike and Angela were together. And I don't know how together they were, but they were together. It was at a convention, and there's a lot of sort of ad hoc together at conventions, but I think that it's probably not a proper term, but they were together. And I never realized how much together until they moved in this direction. We found out that they had crafted their careers separately in a way. Angela crafted hers and Michael his, but they were together. They were together the last time I saw them. They drove on a rainy night from Trenton to a tennis facility in South Jersey to celebrate my birthday. And I can never forget it because they're not tennis players. They weren't there for the tennis. They weren't there for the food. They were there for me. Many of you can say that. They've been there for us over the years. I just think that the thing that I want to point out about Michael more than anything else is how understated he was. That wasn't an accident. Everything about Michael was understated. The way he dressed, the way he presented himself, and the way he managed. At the tennis party, my wife introduced Mike and Angela to some friends of ours, and she described Michael as my boss. And Michael almost cringed, because that's not the way he thought of himself. He didn't have to think of himself that way, because if you really have the talent to manage, you never have to boss. But we did have this one instance, an editorial board meeting. Michael didn't make many editorial board meetings. He had plenty to do. But he stopped in on this one because there were a group of guests, and they were young rappers who had put out some record. And about 15 minutes into their spiel, I started to get excited because they were wearing me out. I was sick of it. Sick of these young guys telling me what it is to be black and all that sort of thing. And so I started to raise up, and I said some things, and they said some things, and it went back and forth, and we were gesticulating, gang signs and all. And I happened to glance over at Michael, and he gave me one of these. That was all it took. I stood down because Michael was the boss. For me, he was a dear friend. The things that you've written about him make me feel smart today. I loved him on my own, but I didn't know how good he was until I started listening to some of the things that you've had to say. Angela, particularly the piece that you posted today from the funeral director was just so touching. Keep writing, but keep giving. This is the day that we start to put together the fund that will represent Michael and Angela because they're together. Let's make the donations. Let's make this thing happen. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk.
Next, we'll hear from Michelle Bjork, who is a former Daily News managing editor.
Angela, thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. It means a lot to me. Michael Days was many things to many people. To Philadelphia and its leaders, he was a passionate advocate for the city where he was born and raised, and he loved dearly. To the readers of the Philadelphia Daily News, he was someone who understood what was important to them and their lives. To the staff of the Daily News, the reporters, editors, photographers, graphic artists, copy editors, and columnists, he was a leader who always had their back. To those who year after year held the future of the Daily News in their hands, he was a formidable presence who fought passionately day in and day out for the scrappy tabloid. To me, he was all those things and more. He was my boss, my teacher, and my mentor. He was my cheerleader, my confidant, and my friend. To me, he was a gentleman who was wise and witty, compassionate and caring, and loyal to everyone he cared about in the newspaper he loved. To me, Michael Days was a once-in-a-lifetime figure and one of the best men I have ever known. A few days before Michael passed away, I had a conversation with a woman who was bemoaning what a terrible boss she had. He didn't understand what she and her team did, yet he second-guessed and criticized their work. After letting her vent for 5 minutes or so, I interrupted her to say that that's not the kind of manager I had at the Daily News. I had Michael Days, who was the definition of a great manager. Someone who hired the most qualified person, then let them do their job. Someone who guided and coached, bolstered their team, and led by example. It was from Michael that I learned how to be a manager at the Daily News. I like to think I was a good one. My enormous respect for Michael made me mold myself after him. About 20 years ago, the top managers of the Daily News began a tradition of taking an afternoon off each December for a festive holiday lunch. Our group included Michael, Pat McClune, Michael Mercani, Sandy Shea, Gar Joseph, and me. We enjoyed each other's company, traded Daily News war stories, and laughed, always laughed. When Gar passed away, our group became smaller. That year, we had our lunch and toasted to Gar's memory. In 2019, Mercani and I left the Daily News. We still got together. In 2020, Michael left the paper, and COVID happened. We missed that year. In 2021, Pat left, followed by Sandy. When December rolled around, none of us were Daily News managers anymore, but we were all still friends. Our lunch became dinner and continued in 2022, 2023, and 2024. The remaining 5 of us, dear friends who together shared treasured, unforgettable years at a paper we all loved so much. Last year, I remember sitting next to Michael and savoring the sound of his hearty laugh. His laugh is one of the things I will miss most. Our group is down to 4 now, and nothing will be the same without Michael. We will continue our holiday get-togethers, but this year there will be tears, and a toast to the best editor and boss any of us have ever had. One of the things I missed the most when I left the paper 6 years ago was the daily interactions with people whom I had worked with for many years, people who were like family to me. Michael was at the top of that list. Michael Days changed my life and changed me. He made me a better person, For that, I am forever blessed and forever grateful. Thank you.
Next, we have Joe Blake, a friend of Mike Day's and also a former reporter and editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer and Daily News.
I don't know if you could ever be a former reporter, but I'm going to try. Thank you, Angela, for allowing me to do this. Melanie and Sarah put on a great job. These are beads that Mike and I made in Ghana. And we always said to each other, when you're going to do something special, you have to wear these beads because you can only do them at special ceremonies. So, Mike, this one's for you. I wrote a poem for Mike the same night he died, and I want to thank Dr. Williams, too, for helping me walk through this and put it into a special place and presentation that people understand. And don't get confused by the title, because you'll understand when we get to the end. It's called Dying in Plain Sight. Great people die in the open, center stage, in the midst of a standing ovation, never in the shadows or behind proclamations, or in the dim glow of trophies in need of dusting. Great people die in the open with their scars, their wounds, their fatigue, front and center, like beautiful annuals in grateful awareness of the coming frost. Rain, snow, sleet, hail are always a sunny day, as great people shun umbrellas, catch cold in secret, while passing you a peppermint to ease your cough. Come breakfast or bullet, dinner or dungeon, a sip of wine, or a slip of poison, great people always die in the open. I say to you, Michael.
Next, we have Lorraine Ballard Morrill, iHeartMedia Markets Group Director of News and Community Affairs for the Philadelphia region.
Thank you, Sarah. I had the privilege of interviewing Michael some years ago when he released his book on President Barack Obama. That conversation reminded me of what made him an exceptional editor: his curiosity, his moral clarity, and his deep understanding that journalism just isn't about headlines. It's about people. He spoke about Obama's journey not as a political story, but as a human one, about hope and struggle, and the power of words to shape how we see ourselves and our country. Michael believed that journalism could and should make the world a little better. And perhaps even more importantly, he believed in people. He mentored, as you've heard so many times, countless reporters, editors, and photographers, especially young journalists of color who saw in him what was possible. He didn't just open doors. He stood in the doorway and invited others to walk through. Even now, his voice endures through his posthumous book, We've Been Here Before: How Rebellion and Activism Have Always Sustained America, co-authored with his beloved wife, Angela P. Dodson. In it, Michael reminds us that America is always defined and redeemed by its rebels and activists. He and Angela tell stories of those who dared to demand a better nation, the mavericks, the dreamers, and the ordinary people who made extraordinary change. It's a powerful reflection of his lifelong belief that journalism at its best is a form of activism for truth. Michael Days was more than an editor. He was a bridge builder, a truth teller, and a believer in our collective capacity to do better. As we honor his memory today, let us carry forward what he modeled so beautifully: to lead with integrity, to tell stories that matter, and to nurture the next generation just as he did. Thank you, Michael, for your courage, for your kindness, and your enduring light. You showed us the way, and we will keep walking in it.
Next, we have Jim Friedlich, Executive Director and CEO of the Lenfest Institute for Journalism.
Good evening. I'm deeply grateful, as each speaker has been, to Angela, Dodson for asking me to speak, and to Melanie Burney for all of your outreach, your leadership, and your kindness over the past few weeks. I first met Michael Days in 2016, so I've not known him anywhere near many of you. It's just been a decade, but from the jump, Mike made me feel like an old friend. I'll share just one of many anecdotes about my dear friend. I was hired in 2016 by the late Jerry Lenfest, shortly after he bought the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Daily News and donated them to nonprofit ownership. No one understood the potential of this and how to leverage it better than Michael Days, the potential for community, the potential for the diversity of the newsroom, of the voice, and of this market than Michael Days. Great newspapers are a lot like great churches, great sports teams, or great universities. There's a formal and an informal structure within a newsroom. Some people have senior titles to whom others report. Some people simply command respect from everyone around them. Michael Days truly had both. So when we started the Lenfest Institute, I asked around, who is the soul of the place? Who is the soul? David Boardman said, Michael Days. Brian Tierney said, Michael Days. Sandy Shea said, Michael Days. And Jerry Lenfest said, Michael Days. So I thought, there's a pattern here. I'll ask Michael Days to lunch. An idea emerged during our lunch, actually. It was Michael's idea. Michael proposed that we bring the best young journalists of color to Philadelphia for a 2-year fellowship called the Lenfest Fellows at the Philadelphia Inquirer, help launch a half-dozen careers each year, and help make the newsroom more diverse, more inventive, and more youthful at the same time, a kind of win-win. Mike and I agreed that my sole contribution to the selection process would be to stay out of the way. This, too, was Michael's idea. Separation of church and state. Mike knew a lot about church and a lot about state. We agreed simply that the fellows would be highly diverse in every way. Geographic origin, racial diversity, skill set diversity, and gender diversity. A few months later, Mike had selected 6 extraordinary young journalists as the first Lenfest Fellows. They had several things in common. First, they came from all around the country. This reflected Mike's view that Philadelphia should be a magnet, a destination city, a kind of North Star for great journalists. Second, their skill sets were deep and diverse. There was sports journalism, health journalism, data journalism, video, photography, and of course, social media. Third, they spoke Hindi, Arabic, Spanish, and English. And fourth, I couldn't help noticing that they were all beautiful young women. So I asked Mike, how do you think we did on the gender diversity thing? And Mike said, I think we did great. Mike went on to explain that of 120 candidates, easily the top 10 to 12 were women. Mike ran a 100% equitable process. He had simply and resolutely chosen the best candidates for the job. He ran a meritocracy. In addition to their outstanding qualifications, I think Mike was drawn to just anyone and everyone who was underrepresented in a newsroom. When I got back to my desk from Mike's wonderful office with candy and African sculptures and pictures of newsmakers, there's an email from Mike. It says, Jim, it's not too late. If you want, I can fire 2 or 3 of these young ladies and find some substantially less qualified guys as fellows. Adding, there are plenty of them out there. I appreciate you, Mike. While it was often delivered, almost always delivered with a smile or a laugh, Michael Days let you know exactly where he stood. Of course, he was right about each and every one of the Lenfest Fellows. They've all gone on to wonderful, wonderful careers in journalism, some here in Philadelphia. One could argue that the daily news of the era of Mike Days is not what it once was. It's true of probably all tabloid newspapers these days, but as a reader and as a kind of fanboy, I don't see it that way at all. To me, the daily news is very much alive and thriving in the voices of the cold case police beat journalism of Barbara Laker, of the extraordinary medical beat reporting of Wendy Ruderman, the constant voice of equity and justice of Janice Armstrong, and so many, many others. And of course, in the Lenfest Fellow, sitting a few rows back, Justinian DeMoya, who has made Philadelphia her home, and community journalism her passion. They say that we pass away 3 times in life. The first when we draw our last breath and our souls ascend. The second when we're laid to rest. And the third when the last person on earth speaks our name or summons our legacy. It will be a long, long, long time before journalists in this town, in this state, and in this country stop talking about the legacy of Mr. Michael Days. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Gabriel Escobar, editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Good evening. What a wonderful tribute to a wonderful man. There is a certain archetype when it comes to the top person in a newsroom. This is the gruff and fearsome editor, aloof, prone to yelling, serious to a fault, imperious, quick to judgment, a bit obtuse, with the warmth of the hammer and the charm of an anvil. Hollywood has mythologized this version of the editor. There are, in fact, male and female versions of it. Like all mythologies, these depictions are an exaggeration, but true at the core. There are many journalists in this room, and I suspect that many of you have suffered editors who bark and bite. This was not Michael Days. He was affable and warm, considerate and compassionate, a consummate journalist who practiced the art of empathy, even as he excelled in journalism. In the newsroom setting, he was the opposite of gruff. His gift was the gentle act of persuasion, often accomplished by a combination of sharp insight into the journalistic matter at hand and a certain look. On the receiving end, his gaze was both observed and felt. There was a convincing physicality to the look he offered up in these instances. There was often a tilt to the head, and his eyes looked at you from the side. He used his smile like a condiment to ease you through a difficult moment and make palpable what was not. His arsenal included that boisterous laugh with a distinct melody that was both heard and felt. There was a pastoral quality to Mike as an editor. That too is an uncommon trait in newsrooms. Likely driven by his deep faith, Mike brought this ministerial approach to journalism and effectively used it to manage the people who reported to him. to bolster them when spirits flagged, to guide them when the path ahead seemed fraught, and yes, to hold them accountable when the moment required it. Mike was proof that an editor not need be that awful archetype to succeed. His journalistic life is one to be modeled because of its inherent traits. The disciplined and accomplished professional who led the newsroom, and the humanity he always displayed and always, always effectively applied. Thank you.
Next is Pedro Ramos, Philadelphia Foundation President and CEO.
Good evening. I'm so very moved to be invited to share remarks about Mike Days, the Philadelphian. I had the privilege of working with Mike when he was at the Daily News, the Inquirer, and recently in support of NABJ-Philadelphia. Our relationship really grew when he was editor of the Daily News and I was Philadelphia's managing director. From the start, Mike wasn't just fair, he cared deeply, was engaged in the community, and he was trusted. Trust he earned. With a journalist's healthy skepticism, he never seemed cynical. He tried to understand everyone involved and made every interaction meaningful. Later at the Philadelphia Foundation, our paths crossed again after the creation of the Lenfest Institute for Journalism. Long before 2020, Mike was invested in making the Inquirer stronger through meaningful diversity. He was always ready to roll up his sleeves, never just talk, always substance. For 3 years before the pandemic, we worked together on the annual On the Table effort with the Knight Foundation. He too liked bringing people together to break bread and connect, especially strangers. In 2019, he helped elevate direct service nonprofits during our centennial programs and spoke compassionately about institutions and movements striving to do better for our region. As someone who spent years in public roles, maybe one of the few sources here today, I learned journalists could show up with different agendas. Mike didn't just want the facts, he wanted context and understanding. I never felt like a source. It always felt like two guys from North Philadelphia having a real conversation. Mike personified the values I was taught by my parents: service to others, humility, curiosity, excellence, and authenticity. Philadelphians are wired to detect a lack of authenticity, and growing up in North Philadelphia, that detector is even stronger. Mike was never fake, he could spot a fake, and even then, he never lost sight of the humanity in anyone. His smile could say a lot. I've just learned today from colleagues that they call it the side eye. And what was the word, Sarah? Instigate. It was amazing because it was often in my interactions with him in the context where I would ask him about something happening or someone, and he would just tell me everything I needed to know with that look. As I prepared these remarks, I looked for Mike's book on President Obama, and its 3 sections really struck me because while I believe they're a fair representation of the president, they spoke of Mike so perfectly. So he organized this book around these 3 sections: a man of the people, a man of action, a man of conviction. Mike was as Philly can be, a leader and servant in the truest sense. He pursued truth and served others with courage and integrity. As Mike once said, we don't do the work because truth We do this work because truth matters and because every voice in our city deserves to be heard. That sums up my mission and all of my experience with him. Today, as we remember Mike, let us carry forward what he taught us. Love this city fiercely, stay true to who we are, and never forget the power of authenticity. That was Mike's gift to Philadelphia and to all of us. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Solomon Jones, WURD radio host and columnist.
Thank you. And thank you, Angela, for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about Michael. Just a couple of weeks ago, he was on a meeting with us that we do every week for a project that we're working on called Building the Black Agenda. And it's funny because when I asked Mike to join that and to help us with that, he didn't hesitate. He was the best kind of leader, the kind of leader that would follow someone else's leadership as well. Mike was a man who, if you knew him, was many things. He was editor of the Philadelphia Daily News. He was president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Philadelphia. He was a husband, he was a father, he was a mentor, he was a friend. But Michael Days was a man of faith. He understood the Bible verse that says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing." Notice it doesn't say that she who finds a husband finds a good thing. But Mike understood that, and he found himself a good thing. I learned that some years ago when we were at a reception in Fairmount for an author. It was years ago. I think it was Walter Mosley. We were at a pastor's house in Fairmount, and it was the first time I met Angela. And the two of them were there. My wife and I were there, and we met Angela, and she stuck her chest out and said, "My husband is the editor of the Philadelphia Daily News." And that stuck with me for years. It stuck with me because there was a pride in her stature. There was a strength in her words. They were the words of a friend and a supporter. The words of somebody who would lift him when he needed it, love him through life's storms, and hold him up when the world tried to knock him down. They were the words of a partner. So I knew that Michael Days was a wise man because he found a good thing. He chose a wife who believed in the power of who he was. And as a black man in a position of leadership, trust me, you need that. He was a man who exhibited the kind of quiet leadership that said, "I'm in charge, you know it, then I know it too." He wasn't, if I were to use a Godfather metaphor, he wasn't the fire of Sonny Corleone. He was the quiet strength of Michael Corleone. Mike would give you that look like, "You broke my heart, Fredo." And you knew you better get it together or you'd be sleeping with the fishes. But when I look back on the things Michael did for me and for so many other journalists, I realized that Mike was an amplifier. He was the megaphone that we all spoke through, and thanks to him, our voices were louder and clearer. Our truth had a wider reach. Our work mattered that much more. But just like he amplified our work, he tempered it as well. I remember one time I wanted to write something spiteful. And I think I asked Mike about it. I said, "Mike, what do you think of this?" And he called me down to the office. And it was almost like a Jedi mind trick. But Mike was like, "Solomon, you don't want to write that." And I was like, "Mike, I don't want to write that." Mike was the kind of guy that could talk you off the ledge without much talking. When I wanted to move toward petty, Mike steered me back toward power. When I sought to move to the next level, Mike was there giving me a boost. You don't get many people like that in life, people who see your talent as a gift and do all they can to make sure that the world receives it. Michael Days nurtured my column in the Daily News and then in the Inquirer. He supported a video project that we wanted to do years ago. I look at the stuff that's on social media now, and I did that 20 years ago, and we tried to sell it. Remember that, Brian? But it wasn't the time yet. But Mike was right there cheering it on. He made sure I was paid what I was worth. And he worked with us to build the Black agenda. Michael Days understood what it meant to use your powers for good, to build up rather than tear down, to give rather than take. And while we'll miss him for all that he was, we're grateful that his voice lives on in us. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Arthur Fennell, former president of the National Association of Black Journalists and also former anchor and executive producer at CN8 TV.
Good evening. First of all, I say good evening to NABJ-Philadelphia, my family. It's so good to be back home and to look out at so many familiar faces that I know and had relationships with and respect, Michael Days being one of them. So I'll be brief. I didn't prepare any remarks, but I'll just give you a little bit about the background that I had with Mike that will speak to a lot of what we've heard already. I'd come to Philadelphia about 35 years ago, was a young news anchor man on NBC 10, and got a call from Michael. Didn't know him, not yet. He said, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. I remember thinking, that was pretty cool. Brother called me and said, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. And he meant it. I saw Mike reach out to a lot of people over the years with that same sentiment. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. You've heard a lot about his leadership style. It's all true. And how quiet and unassuming he was in that leadership style. Well, I've been to Africa a lot. When you're the lion, you don't have to walk around all day roaring. You roar through your steps. He was a quiet warrior and very supportive of me. When I became president of the National Association of Black Journalists, Michael Days was right there. And I'll go a step further. So was Angela. I always felt that they were the dynamic duo. If you got one, you got the other. It was kind of a bonus because they were both very accomplished people. This is an accomplished room. So many great people accomplished and respected in your fields. Mike was a giant among us. We appreciated him, we loved him, and we loved that grin that he always had. Did he have that grin? That disarming smile, that charm that could tell you what he needed to have happen, again, without having to slam it on the desk. What a leader. I admired him, respected him, as I said. I spoke at a dear friend of mine's funeral service the other day, and I mentioned the word legacy, and I'll say that again here and now. We all gather here tonight to celebrate Mike's legacy. We should all be so fortunate that when we're gone, people will gather in our name to talk about what we did, who we touched, how we went about living our lives and walking our walk and living our truth. Michael Days did that as good and better than anybody. Tonight, we celebrate his legacy. I'm proud to be one of the ones who helped hold up his banner. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Sam Ford, a co-founder of the National Association of Black Journalists and retired DC bureau chief at 7 News WJLA.
Good evening, everybody. And, you know, first WHYY, you know, that's the very first black nationwide news program came from this station. And I was a kid, journalist in Minnesota, and I used to watch Reginald Bryant on Black Perspective on the News. And when I sat here, I thought, well, I never thought I'd be there, but here I am tonight. Certainly good to be here. You know, I remember Mike as 20-somethings, right? We have a mutual good friend. Her name is Carolyn Tyler. And Mike and Carolyn were good friends. They were reporters in Minneapolis. And I remember when Carolyn introduced me to Mike. It was at some event in D.C., and they were good friends, and they were talking about some story. And you know how we're journalists, right? But we're also yak-yaks, right? We talk. And so they were saying, yeah, and these people, they had the ugliest baby I think I'd ever seen. They were starting, and Carolyn said, yeah, the only thing I could think of to say was, nice hair. So sometime later, not too much later, I live in D.C., and Gloria and I had our son. He's 42 now. And Carolyn said she was in D.C. and she wanted to see my son. I said, okay. I said, but don't you say anything about his hair. And Carolyn, a few weeks ago, texted me to tell me that she'd seen that Michael had died. And I said, well, we had just been in Cleveland together for the NABJ conference in Cleveland, and we asked Angela, where do we find Michael? And she directed us to him, and we took a picture, and, you know, it was like, wow, what happened? And then we called Shahid to say, what happened? And we did a three-way so we could find out what had happened to our friend, who had been a friend, again, since we were all 20-somethings and through the years. And so it is, well, it was one of those things where it was unbelievable, quite frankly. Now, I've always felt a kinship with Angela and Michael because I married a journalist too. Gloria Murray was a reporter with CNN. We were married when we were in Atlanta. And, you know, as you know, I was with CBS, she was with CNN, and sometimes we were working the same story. I don't know if you were a journalist where you got your spouse, and sometimes you're like, you know, what, sometimes they're competitive stories. You know, maybe you're doing the same thing. So anyway, but there's certainly an understanding there. You know, they understand journalism. You might be called at any time or anything like that because, you know, maybe some spouses might not understand that. But one thing I was curious, Angela, I didn't bring it up to you. Did Michael propose to you by saying, for the record? That was my line. For the record, will you? Oh, wow. Okay. Well, anyway, that was one of the things that I remember saying, for the record. And it was, again, it was one of those things where through the years, we would see each other at these conventions. It was always fun to see Michael and Angela. And as the gentleman said, they were always together. So I guess I'm going to wrap this up because I've kind of lost my place. I got glaucoma, so I don't really read as well as I used to. But certainly Michael was one of the people that I always was extremely fond of when we would go to conventions. He got his great honor at the New Orleans convention some years ago. And among the things that I do these days is, well, I've actually done it for years, is I teach Sunday school at the Methodist Church. And there is a line that is in 2 Timothy, the 7th chapter, or the 4th chapter and 7th verse. Anyway, it is this: I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And that is one of the things, certainly, that you could say about Michael. I am just happy that the city of Philadelphia has been so kind to my friend and showed so much respect. It is a wonderful thing, and frankly, I have not seen anything quite like it before. At the NABJ, we've had some wonderful journalists, and Michael was certainly one of them. Another one was Les Payne. I got on a train and came up to New York when he died, and I was glad I was able to get on a train and come up here to Philadelphia to express my feelings and my respect for Michael Days.
Now I will acknowledge some of the correspondences and condolences as well as proclamations that the family has received. The Days and Dodson family has been in receipt of your outpouring of support, and here I'll share a sampling of those extensions of sympathy and a few proclamations. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said, "It is with a heavy heart that I offer my sincerest condolences to your family as you mourn the passing of your beloved Michael." Philadelphia City Council and Council President Kenyatta Johnson honored Michael in his legacy in City Council chambers a few weeks ago, and numerous NABJ-Philadelphia chapter members and supporters and fellow journalists were present. Commandery 676 Knights of St. John International, Ancient and Noble Order of the Knights of St. John International, stated in their proclamation, whereas Brother Knight Brigadier Mike Days committed himself to the Catholic Church throughout his life, uplifting both the church and the community with his unwavering service. Former New Jersey from New Jersey Congresswoman, not former, but from New Jersey Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, she said, "We honor and celebrate the life of Michael I. Days for his incredible contributions to his family, his community, and the world." And with that, as we learned this evening, behind every amazing and inspiring man is a even more amazing, inspiring, and indomitable woman. And, Michael and Angela are an awesome pair and have touched the lives of so many of us. And I wanted to share one more anecdote about the power of this couple and how I admire them. And my connection to Michael, in addition to news leadership and journalism and him being my boss at one point, is that I have a deep, deep love and admiration for the formation of their family through adoption. And it personally touches my heart as an adopted child as well. I am. And it's not my story to tell, but certainly one day maybe Angela will help you tell your story to the world. But their adoption stories of the Days Dodson family is absolutely inspiring and incredible. And I wanted to share that anecdote that in addition to being an amazing empathetic leader and an amazing journalist, that the family, both Angela and Michael, are an awesome pillar of what love is, and they transcended that love to all of us. And so with that, Angela, we would welcome hearing from you this evening, and we thank you so much for the love you've shown to us, and we hope that you feel the love that we have for you.
I wasn't sure I could do this, but I think that I want to tell you a little bit more about who Michael was as a husband and a father and a brother and a son. First of all, somebody alluded to it in one of their articles this week that Michael and I have different origin stories about how we met. He claims that I met him at the NABJ convention in Baltimore in 1977 at a party in Asa Moore's room, or suite. Asa already was a Pulitzer Prize winner at the time. The rest of us were just starting our careers. I don't have any recollection of meeting him. And I didn't spend any time talking to him because I was in a cluster of people sitting on the floor talking, from people from Minneapolis and California and all kinds of places. And this is the first convention most of us had been to. So you're meeting people for the first time, et cetera, and getting into really heated discussions because we were like in our late 20s. We knew everything. So that's his story. We have since agreed that we won't tell that one anymore because if I don't remember him, it doesn't count as meeting. So my origin story is that I had worked in the Gannett News Service Bureau in Washington, and then I went to graduate school at American U, and I had to complete an internship to get out of grad school, and it could not be my old job. So Gannett sent me to Rochester to work on the Times Union city desk, I think. And one day, all the black reporters and editors wanted to take me out to lunch because I was theoretically only there for the summer. And we all gathered at whatever the appointed hour was, and everybody standing around said, well, we can't leave. Michael Days isn't here. We can't leave. Where's Michael? They can't move without this Michael Days. Who the heck is he? And so what kind of power does he have over these people? So we went to lunch, and I wasn't seated near him, so I didn't really get to talk to him. But I could kind of see his charisma. A day or two later, we passed each other in the hallway between the newsrooms, and he said, why don't we go out to dinner some day? And I said, okay, how about Friday? He says he gets back to his desk and realized that Friday is tomorrow. So that's how we started dating in Rochester. And ours was not, it was kind of an ill-fated romance at first because then he decided to move to Louisville, Kentucky. And I stayed a few months longer, and then I moved back to Washington to work for the Washington Star. At some point, the editors from Louisville were maybe tipped off to the fact that Michael and I were a couple. And they had offered me jobs before I went to grad school. I left that part out because, one, I was a black woman, they didn't have many, and two, I covered coal mining issues in Washington. So I would have been a really good fit for Kentucky. In fact, they wanted to send me to Eastern Kentucky. But I turned it down because they were reporting jobs and I was already editing, and I thought that's the direction I wanted to stay in. Well, at some point while I was in Washington, the editors came to Washington for some meeting or something that I was at, and they offered me a job on the spot. And luckily I took it because the Star folded like 3 months later. I figured I'd move to Louisville and maybe, wait around for a year or two to see if this man was going to propose to me. I was there for 3 weeks before he proposed, and it was on my birthday. I believe it was my 30th birthday. And my mother always came to visit me for my birthday, whatever city I was in. And he waited till she left and proposed, but to this day, I don't remember a word he said. I don't remember whether he got down on his knees. He proposed without a ring. And then, and I said yes, but then because we worked opposite days and opposite shifts, he sent me to the jewelry store to pick out my diamond. And then he goes back to the store to pick out the setting, pay for the diamond, and this woman is looking at him like, I don't believe this black man has enough on his credit card to buy this ring. But he did. It went through. All right. To make a long story short, we had a lovely wedding, garden wedding in Louisville. And then to fast forward, in less than a year after we got married, we had bought a house. Then I got an offer from the New York Times to come for a tryout first. And they said, oh, don't worry, it's usually months after the tryout before they, whether you find out whether you passed or whether they make you an offer. 2 weeks later, after my tryout, the national editor calls me up and says, Angela, come to work for us. I said, is that an offer? So I, molded, and I had, I've got a new husband, I got a new house, I don't really want to move, and I never had a desire to move to New York. So finally, about 3 or 4 days later, when I'm still mulling the offer, Michael leans over and he said, look, Angela, nobody turns down the New York Times, and you are not either. He said, we'll work it out, I'll find a job. So I was in New York for 2 or more months before he was offered a job. And that was with the Wall Street Journal's Bureau in Philadelphia. And people said, oh, you can still do this. You can live in Princeton. You can, commute back and forth. So that's what we did. Princeton was not necessarily a pleasant experience for black people in the late 80s. 2 other stories I'm going to tell because they reflect on him, is that one night, I work nights. I get off 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning in Princeton Junction, which is in the middle of the woods. And so he's on his way to pick me up in my Volkswagen Rabbit. And a cop stops him and accuses him of having stolen the car. And Michael, having the humor and the desire to stay alive, says, officer, this is Princeton, New Jersey. If I'm going to steal a car, it would not be this Volkswagen Rabbit. If you would just, my wife is standing out in the woods at Princeton Junction. If you would just follow me out there and do with me what you will, but let me get her home. So the officer does. He follows him all the way to the station, which is out of his jurisdiction. But as soon as I get in the car, the officer just disappears. Another night, I get to Princeton Junction, and he's nowhere to be found. He had left his car in a garage here that closed, and he didn't realize it. So somehow he convinced policemen in Princeton Junction, I don't even know how he found them, to come get me. So I'm hovering inside the station, and I hear my name being called. And they, sure enough, picked me up and took me home. So that's the kind of protective husband he is. A little bit about what kind of father he is. Some of you may be wondering how it is that we came to acquire 4 children. We had, we knew we needed to adopt, or we wanted to adopt. And one Christmas, Michael says, well, it wouldn't hurt if we started calling the adoption people and see what we need to do. So we had to go through, a lot of screening, a lot of classes in order to adopt anybody. And we were cleared and accepted by the state. And we started getting invited to adoption parties. Stay away from them. And when we got there, somebody said, somebody that had classes with us and knew we wanted a boy, said, did you see that cute little family of 4 boys over there? No, and we don't want to see that. But we we circled the room. We still ended up back in their sphere. They had these social workers that were saying how wonderful they were. And Edward, the child that some of y'all heard at the funeral, was very protective of his brothers. He was what they then called a parentified child. And he was cleaning up around them and making sure they behaved and all that. So we left. At any rate, Michael was pulling me out of the room. And later on, we're driving around like to the diner or whatever. And you know how back in the old days they used to have little pictures of adoptable children in the newspaper? We opened up the newspaper, and all 4 of those children are in an ad. So we could read their background a little bit. And as Michael used to put it, Jesus, you're just messing with me now. I've seen the children. I know what to do. So we went through the weekend talking about them, and I rarely went to church in those days, and there was a church right across the street, and I went, and I came back in the house, and Michael said, "What did God say?" And I said, "He said, do the right thing." So by Sunday night or whatever, he said, "Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt if we called the social workers, blah, 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 blah." So we started calling social workers, and nobody knew who these children were or who had brought them to the adoption party. It's because they were from another county, and it took us, being the reporters that we are, you know, that was just a challenge. So we tracked them down, got the social workers to come see us, and they actually tried to talk us out of it. You look like nice upper class people. You really don't want to be bought. You know the kind of problems these children have, blah, blah, blah. So that was another challenge. And we finally got through it. They said, "Okay, if you're serious, we'll allow another meeting." This was like the middle of October, because it was one of the children's birthdays is October 13th, and he turned 5 that day. We didn't get to see them again until mid-January. Then they started allowing them to visit us. And then finally, by the end of the spring, they said, "Well, if you're really serious, you can have them the day after school is out in June." So that's how we got the children. But sometimes people ask me if Michael is as calm at home as he is at work. And I said, yeah, what you see is what you get. He could sleep or work with all 4 children leaping over his head, and it would not faze him in the least. As the other side of Michael was he loved to host things, parties, picnics, barbecues, and decorate things. Our good friend Joe Blake, I don't know where he is, just found out today that I'm not the Christmas decorator, because Michael would decorate every surface in the house, and this process took weeks. I'd come downstairs in the morning, and he had done the mantle. I'd come downstairs like the next morning, and he had put 2 huge Santas on either side of the mantle. He had put up the lights on the, what do you call it, the step reel. That's who he would go, after a long day at work, he would go to his mother's and decorate her house for Christmas. So, you know, when my son was asked to speak at the funeral, he said up until the day of, he didn't know what he was going to say. It was probably going to be something like, "Thank you very much for coming." And that's kind of how I felt tonight. But I do want to thank everybody who helped plan this, execute it, Melanie, Sarah, who am I leaving out? The whole chapter, everybody who was here, Shahid, people who did the programs, this is a very professional production. And you all have helped me greatly in your comments. I mean, I thought I knew what a great man he is, but a lot of things I heard tonight, I didn't even know he does. And the other thing I want to say about Michael, though, is my description of him is everybody thinks that he has solved their problems, or that he, really gives them good advice. But as his wife, who sat on the other side of the room through many of these conversations, with men and with women, people would call him up and just talk for hours. And I'm listening on my side, and he's saying, yeah, man, And he hasn't done anything. He hasn't said anything to guide them, force them, order them, whatever. But what we all need is a good listener. He listened to me. He listened to his friends. I know his good friend Yvette Owsley, sometimes calls and they talk forever. Joe Blake talks forever. Anybody on his staff could call up. People in the neighborhood, like Shahid, and he would listen. And we all need that in our lives, and he mastered that art a long time ago. Thank you.
Now for the closing and benediction, Reverend Lorena Marshall Blake, President of the Independence Blue Cross Foundation and Independence Blue Cross, Vice President of Community Affairs.
Good evening. Let the church say amen. Amen, amen. You know, in Psalm 118, it says that this is the day that the Lord hath made. And we are rejoicing and glad to be in it when we think of Michael I days. Amen? All right, now, church, you're going to have to answer better than that. And thank you. And then in Psalm 139, it says, we are marvelously and wonderfully made. And when we were yet in our mother's womb, the Lord knew all about us. And he knew all about Mike, his uprising, and his downsitting. And again, we may have been surprised, but the Lord was not surprised. And then in Psalm 133:1, it says, oh, how sweet it is when brethren come together in unity. And we have come together to celebrate a life of a great man, a man of all seasons, a man who was always there. And again, when I thought about this, the sudden passing of Mike left a profound void in the journalism community and the hearts of all who knew him and admired him. He was more than a journalist. He was a beacon of truth, and it's been said tonight, a relentless advocate for integrity and a mentor to countless individuals who aspire to uphold the higher standards of the profession. His work not only informed, but inspired, shaping conversations that mattered and giving voice to those who needed to be heard. But beyond all this, and beyond Michael's professional achievements, he embodied compassion, courage, and unwavering dedication to the principles of fairness and justice. His legacy will endure in every story told with honesty and every journalist who strives to make a difference. I, along with you, we mourn this tremendous loss and extend again our deepest condolences to Angela and to the family, to you, his colleagues, and all who were touched by his remarkable life. And you know, my hope is that as we honor him by continuing the work he championed and by carrying forth the values that he held so dear. And I was also asked to, I love it, don't hold up the sign. To my side, okay. I get to speak last. But again, finally, as I get to do the benediction, I said, again, we thank all who have come out tonight to share with us tonight and to leave feeling inspired. However, there was an African proverb that I came across that says, however long the night, the dawn will break. In times of loss, the darkness can feel endless, but this proverb reminds us that light will return. And though grief is heavy, now hope and healing will come with time. And may this truth bring comfort and strength as we honor Michael. And then finally, in my benediction, may the memories we've shared today inspire us to live with kindness, with courage, and joy. And as we leave this place, may peace surround us, hope guide us, and love unite us, and go forth with hearts lifted, carrying light into the world. Amen? Amen. Thank you.
That concludes our memorial service. We do have a treat for you, but first wanted to again thank you all for coming and participating. And as a reminder, the Michael Days Scholarship is accepting donations, so please look at the bottom of the program and consider a gift. We're at $9,000, over $9,000 of the $50,000 goal, so we're heading in the right direction. And tonight we're going to end on a high note, and it speaks to the spirit of Mike. If you knew him well, while he was a steady spirit, he was a joyful man, and he certainly had something that he often loved to do, and that was dance. So in spirit and in honoring his spirit and his joy, we have a closing song by Mark Early Jr., and that is one of Mike's favorites, Frankie Beverly and Maze's Before I Let Go. And after we take it out, we encourage you to stick around. We'll try to take a few group photos for those who participated in the service tonight. Again, thanks for coming and have a wonderful evening.
All right, well, he said that we going to go out on a high note. So, y'all ready to have a good time? Y'all ready to have a good time? All right, well, come on, everybody. Hold on, wait a minute. Okay, I think. Okay, all right. Here we go. Let's go. Whoa, whoa. Come on, everybody put those hands in. Come on, let's go, come on. Can I get a little bit more in the microphone over here? Can I get a little more in the mic? Come on. Everybody on your feet. Come on, let's go, let's go. Come on. Everybody know this. Y'all see them dancing like this? Uh-huh. See, you make me happy. This you can bear. You stood right beside me. Yeah, and I won't forget. And I really love you. You should know. I want to make sure I'm right before I let go. We had our good times, that's what they say. We hurted each other. Oh, girl, it's a shame. No, I won't be foolish, no. I want to know. I want to make sure I'm right before I let go. Yeah. You know, I think the sun shines and rise on you. 'Cause you know there's nothing I would not do. Oh, no, before I let you go. Go. I would never let you go. Yeah. Before I let go. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael. Go and have a good time with your bad self. Yeah. Yeah. We were so close. Oh, I love your charm. Yeah. I can't understand. No. Where did we go wrong? I won't be asking, no. I've got to know. I gotta make sure I'm right before I let go. Yeah. Before I let go. Before I let go, yeah, yeah, I'll never let go. I'll never let go, yeah. Come on, help me say, ba, ba, ba. Come on, I know y'all know this part. Let me hear. Ba, 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 da, ba. Let me lift it up. Say, I don't hear y'all. This side over here say, ba-da, ba-da, ba. Uh-huh. What about the people in the back? Ba, ba, ba. Yeah, y'all sound good in here. Sing it again. Ba, ba, da, ba. Uh-huh. It's all right to dance a little bit. Ba, 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 da, ba. Because I know he dancing. Don't y'all let him watch y'all dance by himself. Hey, ba, da, ba. Yeah, I'll never let go. Yeah, I'll never, 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 never let go. Yeah. Rest in peace, Mr. Michael Days. Thank you for your work and your appreciation.